Good morning, everyone. I am Joanna Adams from the Open Research team based in the library. Today, I'm going to tell you about the open access requirements for UKRI funded long-form publications. So we'll just have a quick recap of what the policy applies to, tell you a little bit about open licenses, what you have to do to make your long-form publication open access, and how we can apply for funding where that's necessary. Okay, so UKRI have had an open access policy for peer-reviewed research articles and conference papers for quite some time. But from the 1st of January 2024, that policy has been extended to cover monographs, book chapters, and edited collections. So the journal requirements are that the journal article should be made immediately open access on publication under an open license. And that can either be through the green route, where you deposit the unformatted accepted manuscript in institutional repository, or through the gold route, where the publisher final version is published on the publisher's platform. It should be under an open license, and there are no embargoes allowed anymore. It's immediate open access. For the long form, the requirements are a bit more flexible because it's quite new. So I should say this only applies to UKRI funded research. Other funders like Wellcome, Horizon also have open access requirements for long form, but you should check your funder requirements and the terms and conditions of your grant. So for the long form, the final version of record or the author's accepted manuscript, which is your peer-reviewed corrected draft but before the publisher's formatting has been applied, must be free to view and download online within 12 months of publication, and it must be under an open license that allows sharing and reuse. The version that is made open access should, wherever possible, include images, illustrations, tables, and any other supporting content. Where you deposit the author's accepted manuscript rather than the final published version, you should make clear that it's not the final version. Now, you will be able to see the UKRI Open Access policy for definitions of all of the in-scope outputs and also the outputs that are not considered in scope. But it'll be for in-scope, it's your monograph, edited collections. Now that applies where the editor has to acknowledge UKRI funding and satisfy the terms of the open access policy. If you are publishing a chapter in an edited collection, then you would come under the requirements for a book chapter. There are some long-form publications which are out of scope of the policy, and that would include trade books, unless they are the sole output from a UKRI funded research grant. Scholarly editions are not in scope of the policy, and exhibition catalogues, illustrated catalogues, textbooks not included, and the policy doesn't apply to fictional works or any type of creative writing. However, these outputs are encouraged to be open access where you can, but they're not required to be. When I say use an open license, I'm talking about the Creative Commons license. If you are not familiar with these, they are a suite of licenses applied by the author to your work that sets out the terms and conditions of how your work can be shared and reused. So the CC-BY is the license that permits maximum reuse. Now, credit is always given to the creator as well. So CC-BY allows you to share, reuse it, adapt it. You might want to share your work for non-commercial purposes only, or you might not want any derivative works to be made. So then you've got your NC and your ND licenses. Now, although the CC-BY license is preferred by UKRI, you are allowed to use one of these other licenses for long-form publications. For journal articles, conference papers, you must use the CC BY unless you've applied for an exception. If you are subject to Crown copyright or one of your co-authors is, you are allowed to use that license. And third-party content included doesn't have to come under the same license as the rest of the output. So as I said, you should try to include wherever you can any images and other supporting content, but you can make it open under a different Creative Commons license from the rest of the output or on an all rights reserved basis. There is a UKRI guide, it's quite comprehensive on managing your third-party copyright under the UKRI Open Access Policy. I've added a link here and I'll share the slides later. If you are unable to obtain reuse permissions for third-party materials and there is no suitable alternative to enable open access publication, for example, if the book really relies on that third-party content to make sense, then there is an exemption. But that should be a last resort. You don't have to ask for permission from UKRI for an exemption, but if you liaise with the Open Research team, and we will notify UKRI of the issues. There are some other exemptions, and then again, they should only be used if absolutely necessary. It could be that the only appropriate publisher for your output is not able to offer a suitable open access policy. You would be expected to liaise with them and check other options first before taking that step. As we said, where you can't reuse the third-party materials, then we can apply for an exemption there as well. The outputs that are not in scope of the policy are your long-form outputs arising from UKRI training grants, unless they are the only output from that training grant. And we are expected, the institution, to support early career researchers to make their outputs long-form wherever possible. Theses are not covered by this policy. They have still got their own terms and conditions, which are outlined in the training grant. Also, outputs which are published more than 7 years after the end of your research grant are not expected to be open access. So the first thing to do when you're thinking about where am I going to publish, discuss your open access requirements with your publisher and make sure that they offer a compliant route to open access. If you have co-authors, also discuss your requirements with them and make sure that they're able to comply, particularly if you're not the corresponding author. Now, you should consider different publication models. You don't have to pay for open access, although you can if UKRI are able to provide funds. There is the Gain Open Access route where you can deposit the accepted manuscripts in the institutional repository. There is also Diamond Open Access. There are a lot of new presses springing up now. There's like university presses like AUP. Other institutions also have university presses where perhaps the costs of publication are covered by the publisher, and that could be through a variety of publishing models, whether that's community initiatives, donations or subscriber memberships. So the final published version of Record will be open access, but there's no cost to publish and there's no cost to read. University of Sheffield have made a nice list. It's got some examples of publishers that are offering Diamond Open Access or different models of open access, but it is up to you where you publish, and I'm not ruling out your big commercial publishers. They're still fine. As long as you can meet your funder open requirements, you can publish wherever you choose. If you need any advice on this, then you can contact us, the Open Research team, and we'll be able to help. When you are thinking about where to publish, if you are paying a book processing charge or you're paying to publish, there is a really handy checklist. It's called Think, Check, Submit. Unfortunately, there are some predatory or questionable publishers that will charge for services that they either can't or have no intentions of providing. This checklist is just a tool to help you avoid those publishers. So if you ask yourself this list of questions, it will help you assess whether or not a publisher is suitable for your research and whether you want to pay to publish there. And this checklist, there's two, there's one for books and there's one for journal articles as well. So it's a really handy tool. And especially if you're new to publishing, we do recommend that you use that. It is a term of your research grant that you acknowledge your funder. There is a standard statement that we recommend that you use, and that will include your grant reference number as well. Don't confuse your grant reference number with internal budget codes, which usually start RG. It must be the reference number from your funder. Now, UKRI are providing a central fund to support open access for long-form publications. So as I said, you don't have to pay. There are other options. There's your Green Open Access, it could be Diamond Open Access, but if you find yourself wanting to publish somewhere where you do have to pay, then the Open Research team will help you with that. What we do is we apply for the funding from UKRI on your behalf, and there are two stages. So at the first point, and we recommend that you do this as early as possible, we get in touch with UKRI with the publisher, the price, and a short description of the output that you're going to publish. And we will ask for funding. At this point, the UKRI will just confirm whether your output is in scope of the policy and is eligible for funding. Now, you don't need to be signing a contract at this point, and there's no commitment for you to publish. You might change your mind. Your publication just might not make it that far. That is okay, but you must do the stage one before we can continue to the stage two. Now, at stage two, this is when you are ready to publish. We realise this could be quite some time after the stage one application, but that is okay. And at this point, the Open Research team will liaise with you and your publisher to ensure that the output is published open access, meets the UKRI requirements, and we will help you to pay the invoice. After that, the institution applies to UKRI to be reimbursed for the payment. If you have already requested publication costs for a monograph book chapter or edited collections in a previous grant application, and you have funds for that in your research grant, you should use that in the first instance before applying for the UKRI Central Fund. Also, if your output is published 7 or more years after the end of that UKRI funded project, it will no longer be eligible for support from the UKRI's fund. So bear that in mind when you're considering where to publish. They may not pay for something after that length of time. However, if you have already made a stage one application, it's been confirmed that you're eligible, and then there's a delay which prevents your output being published within that 7-year period, then we will get in touch with UKRI. They will be flexible where there are issues out with our control, but it's really important that you just keep in touch with the Open Research team, and we liaise with UKRI about that. So the eligible costs, and there are caps on the amounts that you're allowed to apply for. So the UKRI funds can be used to support a range of open access models, as well as your book processing charge. They will also support those diamond or community collective models of publishing. So if you're applying for a book processing charge, it is up to £10,000. For a chapter, you can apply for up to £1,000. And for these sort of diamond models, it's up to £6,000, maybe a bit more where there's more than one eligible output going to the same volume or the same initiative. Now, it's important to note that these amounts are inclusive of VAT. So when you publish like a book processing charge or a chapter, the price will also be subject to VAT at 20%. Now, UKRI will not pay out any more than these maximum limits. So anything above that, you will be responsible for. We don't have a central institutional fund, so you'll need to liaise with your school or negotiate with your publisher to make sure that you can cover the costs from your UKRI application. You can apply up to £2,000 within that maximum funding levels to support copyright clearance permissions, although that should be accounted for in your research grant application wherever possible. And again, any questions about that, please get in touch with the Open Research team. So if you want to apply to UKRI for funds for your long form publication, first thing we do is make that stage 1 application. Now, as we say, do this as early as possible. They know that things might change and you're not committing to publish anything at that point, but you will get confirmation from UKRI that that output is eligible and in scope, and it will be able to apply for funding at stage 2. So if you contact the Open Research team, we have got a form for you to fill out. It just asks a few questions about who are you publishing with, a short description of your output, what costs are you applying for. It's not too difficult to fill out, it's not too long. So then the Open Research team will make that application to UKRI. UKRI will get back to us to confirm or not whether your output is eligible. And once you have got that confirmation, you'll be able to proceed with your publication. Now, you must do the stage 1 application before you can make a stage 2 application for payment. So when you get to stage 2, which bearing in mind could be quite some time after the initial stage 1, you contact the Open Research team again, and we will liaise with you when you're publishing. It's quite new for us. We've had 2 stage 1 applications so far, which went fine. We're not quite at the stage 2 point yet, but what we're finding is the publisher will get in touch. You can copy us into the emails. We'll be able to provide them with the finance information that they need. We will arrange the payment, and then we apply to UKRI to be reimbursed at a later stage. So the admin is not too much for the author. It's mostly being done by the Open Research team and the finance team. So that's it really. So just to sum up, first thing to do is make sure that your publisher offers a compliant open access route. If you are using third-party content, make sure that you have got permission to use that. It can be under a different license from the rest of the output. If you think you need to apply for an exemption, of course, this will be in rare circumstances. Get in touch with the Open Research team and we will help you with that. Make your stage 1 application via the Open Research team as early as possible to get confirmation that your output is eligible for funding. And then stage 2 is when you get to the publication stage, and we will help you with that. So if there are any questions at all, just email us, the Open Research team. You will find a lot of information on this on our web pages as well, and we've also linked out to the UKRI Open Access policy there. Okay, so if anyone has got any questions, then you can ask me now, or you've got our contact details for later on. So I will just stop sharing my screen and we'll stop the recording now.